A widow on the Texas frontier faces a choice that could bridge two worlds or spark conflict that changes everything. When a stranger's plea reaches her door, the decision she makes will test her courage, her heart, and her place in a divided land. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier settlement of Willow Creek in the summer of 1867. Sarah Mitchell stood at the grave of her husband James, who had been taken by fever just 3 weeks prior. Her 8-year-old daughter Emily clutched her hand tightly, tears streaming down her small face. The wooden cross seemed too simple a marker for the man who had been their entire world. "Mama, why did Papa have to go to heaven?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible above the gentle prairie wind. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of blonde hair from Emily's face. "Sometimes God calls people home before we're ready to say goodbye. Your father loved us very much, and he'll always watch over us." As they walked back toward their modest cabin on the edge of town, Sarah felt the weight of her new reality pressing down on her shoulders. With James gone, the responsibility of maintaining their small homestead fell solely to her. The garden needed tending, the livestock required care, and winter would come all too soon. Her hands were already raw from work, and exhaustion had become her constant companion. The following morning, Sarah was awakened by a gentle knock at the door. Emily was still asleep, curled up in the small bed they now shared. Sarah quickly pulled a shawl around her shoulders and opened the door to find Mary Watson, the wife of the town's general store owner. "Good morning, Sarah," Mary said, her round face creased with concern. "I've brought some bread and preserves. Thomas and I thought you might need some extra provisions." Sarah accepted the basket gratefully. "You're too kind, Mary. Please thank Thomas for me." Mary hesitated at the threshold. "There's something else. A band of Comanche has made camp about 3 miles from town. The men are keeping watch, but Sheriff Collins says they seem peaceful enough. They've sent word they wish to trade." Sarah nodded, though the news made her uneasy. Relations with the native tribes had been tense but mostly peaceful in recent months. James had always believed in treating the indigenous people with respect, unlike some of the more hardened settlers who viewed them with open hostility. "Thank you for letting me know," Sarah replied, her mind already calculating how many supplies they had left. With James gone, hunting was now beyond her capabilities, and their stores were dwindling rapidly. Later that afternoon, as Sarah was hanging laundry while Emily played with her rag doll on the porch, she spotted a lone figure approaching on horseback. Her heart raced as she recognized the distinctive dress and bearing of a Comanche warrior. She quickly called Emily to her side, positioning herself protectively in front of her daughter. The rider stopped at a respectful distance, raising his hand in a gesture of peace. He was a tall man with copper skin and long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather. His face bore the weathered lines of someone who had seen many seasons, yet his eyes reflected a profound dignity. "I come in peace," he said in surprisingly good English. "I am called Running Wolf of the Comanche people." Sarah stood her ground but nodded politely. "I am Sarah Mitchell. This is my daughter, Emily." Running Wolf dismounted with fluid grace that belied his years. "I have heard in the town that you recently lost your husband. My condolences for your sorrow." Sarah was taken aback by his courtesy. "Thank you," she replied cautiously. "I come with a proposal," Running Wolf continued, his voice steady and measured. "My daughter Sky Flower gave birth 5 days ago, but she has fallen ill and cannot feed her child. The baby girl grows weaker with each passing day." Sarah felt a pang of maternal empathy despite her wariness. The death of an infant was a tragedy that transcended cultural boundaries. Running Wolf's next words surprised her even more. "I have learned that you still nurse your youngest child who died alongside your husband." Sarah instinctively placed a hand over her breast, which still ached with milk meant for her 3-month-old son who had succumbed to the same fever that took James. The physical reminder of her loss was a daily torment she bore in silence. "How did you know this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The woman at the trading post speaks much," Running Wolf replied simply. "I come to ask if you would consider nursing my granddaughter. In return, I offer protection and hunting for your family through the coming winter." Emily tugged at her mother's skirt. "Mama, what does he want?" Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her daughter's shoulder. "He has a baby granddaughter who needs milk, sweetheart." Emily's eyes widened with understanding. "Like baby Michael needed before he went to heaven with Papa?" Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. The proposition was unprecedented, yet she couldn't deny the practical wisdom of it. Her body produced milk that was going to waste, while somewhere a newborn starved. And the offer of hunting and protection through winter could mean the difference between survival and joining James and Michael in the cemetery on the hill. "I need time to consider this," Sarah finally said, meeting Running Wolf's steady gaze. The Comanche warrior nodded. "I will return tomorrow when the sun reaches its highest point. The child's need is great, but I understand this is not a small thing I ask." As Running Wolf mounted his horse and rode away, Sarah stood motionless, watching his retreating figure blend with the vast landscape. She wondered what James would advise if he were still alive. The thought of nursing a Comanche baby would scandalize many in town. Yet she couldn't help but feel that perhaps this strange twist of fate might offer healing for her own grieving heart as well. That night, sleep eluded Sarah as she contemplated Running Wolf's unusual request. The cabin felt particularly empty, the silence broken only by Emily's soft breathing and the occasional howl of a coyote in the distance. Sarah's breasts ached painfully, swollen with milk that had no purpose now that Michael was gone. Every night, she would press cool cloths against them, trying to ease the discomfort while fighting back tears that seemed endless. Dawn broke with a palette of pinks and oranges across the eastern sky. Sarah rose early, her decision made after a night of prayer and contemplation. She prepared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush for Emily, her movements deliberate as she rehearsed in her mind what she would tell Running Wolf when he returned. "Are we going to help the Indian baby, Mama?" Emily asked as she finished her breakfast, always perceptive beyond her years. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair. "I believe we are, sweetheart. That little baby needs milk to survive, just like you and Michael did when you were tiny." Emily considered this solemnly. "Papa always said we should help people when they need it, even if they're different from us." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with grief. James had indeed instilled values of compassion and fairness in their daughter. "That's right, Emily. Your father was a good man with a kind heart." As midday approached, Sarah changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton garment that James had always admired. She wasn't entirely sure why she felt the need to dress formally for this meeting, but something about the gravity of what she was agreeing to demanded respect. Running Wolf arrived precisely when he said he would, this time accompanied by a younger man who he introduced as Swift Arrow, his sister's son. Swift Arrow carried a small bundle wrapped in soft animal skins. "This is Morning Star," Running Wolf said, as Swift Arrow carefully transferred the tiny bundle to Sarah's arms. Sarah gently pulled back the soft buckskin to reveal a newborn with copper skin and a tuft of black hair. The baby was painfully thin, her tiny face pinched with hunger, dark eyes unfocused but seeking. A wave of maternal instinct washed over Sarah as she cradled the infant. "She is very weak," Sarah observed, her nurse's training from before her marriage evident in her assessment. "How long has it been since she's had proper feeding?" 2 days, Running Wolf replied, concern etching deep lines around his eyes. "We have tried milk from goats, but she cannot keep it inside her body." Sarah nodded, understanding the urgency. Without hesitation, she moved to the rocking chair on the porch and settled herself, adjusting her dress discreetly to offer her breast to the starving infant. Morning Star latched on weakly at first, then with increasing strength as the nourishment she so desperately needed began to flow. Emily watched with wide-eyed curiosity while Running Wolf and Swift Arrow respectfully turned their attention to the distant horizon, allowing Sarah privacy in this intimate act. "The milk is good for her," Sarah said after several minutes. "Her color is already improving." Running Wolf nodded, relief evident in his posture, though his expression remained stoic. My daughter Sky Flower burns with fever. Our medicine woman works to heal her, but the baby cannot wait. How far is your camp? Sarah asked, her mind already calculating the practicalities of this arrangement. 3 miles to the west, near the bend in the river, Swift Arrow replied, speaking for the first time. His English was less polished than Running Wolf's, but clear enough. Sarah made a quick decision. I cannot leave my homestead unattended for long periods, and Emily needs me here. But I could ride to your camp morning and evening to feed Morning Star, and perhaps bring her here during the day. Running Wolf considered this proposal. This could work. Swift Arrow, or I will escort you each time for safety. And your promise of hunting and protection? Sarah asked directly, knowing her survival depended on establishing clear terms. It stands, Running Wolf confirmed. My hunters will bring meat to your cabin each week. We will watch over your land and animals when you cannot. As they discussed the details, Sarah became aware of curious glances from neighboring homesteads. Word would spread quickly in a small settlement like Willow Creek. She straightened her spine, prepared for the judgment that would surely come. When Morning Star had fed sufficiently, Sarah carefully rewrapped her and returned her to Swift Arrow's waiting arms. The infant's face was now relaxed in sleep. Tiny fists curled contentedly. I'll ride to your camp this evening before sunset, Sarah stated firmly. I'll bring clean claws and some salve that might help Skyflower's fever. After the Comanche had departed with promises to return with a gentle horse for Sarah's use, Emily looked up at her mother with solemn eyes. Mrs. Baker from church is watching us from her garden, Mama. She looks angry. Sarah glanced over to see Harriet Baker indeed staring openly, her face twisted with disapproval. The woman turned abruptly and hurried toward town, undoubtedly to spread the news of Sarah Mitchell's shocking arrangement with the Comanche. Not everyone will understand our decision, Emily, Sarah explained gently. Some people fear what is different or what they don't understand. But sometimes doing the right thing isn't the same as doing the easy thing. That evening, Sarah rode alongside Swift Arrow to the Comanche camp, her heart pounding with nervousness and determination in equal measure. The camp was smaller than she had imagined, perhaps 15 lodges arranged in a semicircle along the riverbank. Children paused in their play to stare at the white woman entering their domain, while women watched warily from cooking fires. Swift Arrow led her to a lodge near the center of the camp. Inside, a young woman lay on a bed of furs, her face flushed with fever. An elderly woman with intricate facial tattoos sat beside her, grinding herbs in a stone mortar. This is Skyflower, Running Wolf said softly, indicating his daughter. And our medicine woman sees far. Sarah approached carefully, setting down her bag of remedies. She introduced herself to the medicine woman with respectful gestures since they shared no common language. To her surprise, Ceasefar nodded with what appeared to be approval, moving aside to allow Sarah to examine Skyflower. The young mother's skin burned with fever, but her eyes flickered open at Sarah's cool touch. She whispered something in her native tongue, her gaze flitting anxiously to where Swift Arrow held the baby. She asks if her baby still lives, Running Wolf translated. Yes, Sarah assured her in a gentle voice, taking Morning Star and bringing her close so Skyflower could see her daughter. She's strong, I've given her milk, and she's already improving. Tears slid down Skyflower's cheeks as she reached out a trembling hand to touch her baby's face. She spoke again, her voice weak but insistent. She thanks you for saving her child's life, Running Wolf translated, his own voice thick with emotion. She says the Great Spirit has sent you. Sarah felt her own eyes fill with tears as she settled beside Skyflower to nurse Morning Star once more. In this moment, the vast differences between them seemed to fade away, leaving only two mothers connected by the most fundamental act of nurturing new life. Later, as Swift Arrow escorted her back to her cabin in the gathering twilight, Sarah realized that her path forward, though fraught with challenges, now held a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since losing James and Michael, she felt the stirring of hope. The next morning, Sarah awoke to the sound of knocking, not the respectful tap of Running Wolf, but an insistent pounding that spoke of indignation. She quickly dressed and opened the door to find Sheriff Collins standing on her porch, his weathered face set in grim lines. Behind him stood Reverend Porter and 3 members of the town council. "Mrs. Mitchell," the sheriff began, removing his hat, "there's been talk in town about your arrangement with the Comanche." Sarah lifted her chin. "I'm providing milk for a starving infant, Sheriff. Nothing more, nothing less." Reverend Porter stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow across the threshold. "Sarah, we understand you've suffered greatly with the loss of James and your baby boy. Perhaps your judgment is clouded by grief." "My judgment is perfectly clear, Reverend," Sarah replied evenly. "A baby needed milk, and I have milk to give. Would you have me turn away a starving child?" "These are savages, Mrs. Mitchell," interjected Harold Dawson, the banker. "You're consorting with the very people who've killed settlers all across the territory." "Running Wolf and his band have maintained peace with our settlement," Sarah countered. "And that savage baby is an innocent child who's done no harm to anyone." Sheriff Collins sighed heavily. "Sarah, I can't force you to stop what you're doing, but I want you to consider the implications. You're isolated out here. What if this is some kind of trick? What if they're just using you to scout our defenses?" Sarah felt Emily press against her skirts, listening to every word. She placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sheriff, I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision. Running Wolf has promised protection and hunting in exchange for my help. With James gone, I need that assistance to survive the winter. We can help you, Sarah," Reverend Porter offered. "The church fund is barely enough to keep the roof from leaking," Sarah finished for him. "I know how stretched the settlement's resources are, Reverend. I won't be a burden when I have a way to provide for Emily and myself." The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly at a loss for how to proceed with a widow who refused to be reasoned with. "At least allow me to post a deputy near your property," the sheriff suggested, "for your protection." Sarah considered this, then nodded. "As long as he doesn't interfere with my comings and goings, or threaten my Comanche visitors." As the men departed with reluctant acceptance, Sarah noticed Mrs. Baker and several other women from town watching from the road, their disapproving whispers carrying on the morning breeze. "Mama, are we in trouble?" Emily asked once they were alone. Sarah knelt to look her daughter in the eyes. "No, sweetheart. People are just worried because they don't understand. Remember how scared you were of Mr. Jenkins' big dog until you got to know him?" Emily nodded. "And then I found out he was really gentle and liked to have his ears scratched." "Exactly. Sometimes fear makes people say and do unkind things. But we know we're doing the right thing helping baby Morning Star, don't we?" "Yes, Mama. And Papa would be proud, wouldn't he?" Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes, Emily. Your father would be very proud indeed." That afternoon, Swift Arrow arrived with the promised gentle Mar, a dappled gray with kind eyes. He also brought a haunch of venison, freshly dressed and ready for cooking. Sarah accepted both gratefully, aware of Deputy Wilson watching from the edge of her property, his hand never far from his holster. When Sarah rode to the Comanche camp that evening, she found Sky Flower's condition somewhat improved. The young mother was able to sit up briefly, supported by C's Far, to watch as Sarah nursed Morning Star. Through Running Wolf's translation, the two women began to communicate, finding common ground in motherhood, despite their different languages and customs. "She asks about your son," Running Wolf said as Sky Flower gestured questioningly. Sarah's hands stilled momentarily as she adjusted Morning Star at her breast. He was 3 months old. His name was Michael. The fever took him and my husband within days of each other. When Running Wolf translated, Skyflower's eyes filled with compassion. She reached out to touch Sarah's hand, speaking softly. "She says that your son's spirit guides her daughter now," Running Wolf translated. "That he led you to us so his milk would not be wasted." A simple statement, delivered without pity or awkwardness, broke through the careful composure Sarah had maintained. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded. finding unexpected comfort in the spiritual interpretation of their connection. As days turned into weeks, a rhythm developed. Sarah would ride to the Comanche camp each morning and evening, staying long enough to feed Morning Star and check on Skyflower's recovery. During the day, Swift Arrow would bring the baby to Sarah's cabin, where she could nurse her while tending to her chores and caring for Emily. Emily quickly became attached to the infant, talking to her constantly and helping Sarah with the baby's care. "When will Morning Star laugh, Mama?" she would ask. Michael was just starting to smile before he went to heaven. "Soon," Sarah would promise, marveling at how the presence of this child was helping heal her daughter's grief as well as her own. In town, however, attitudes ranged from grudging acceptance to outright hostility. Some, like Mary Watson, defended Sarah's choice. "For heaven's sake, she's feeding a hungry baby, not plotting an uprising," Mary declared loudly in the general store when Mrs. Baker was spreading particularly malicious gossip. Others were less understanding. Sarah found herself excluded from church socials and sewing circles. Emily came home from school one day in tears because Timmy Baker had called her Indian lover and said her mother was a traitor. Sarah wiped her daughter's tears and reminded her of James's favorite Bible verse, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." "We're building peace, Emily," she explained. "One small bridge at a time." The true test came in late October, when a group of ranch hands passing through Willow Creek heard about the white woman nursing a Comanche baby. Fueled by whiskey and long-held grudges against the native tribes, 3 men rode out to Sarah's cabin one evening with torches and whiskey-fueled courage. Sarah was alone with Emily, having just returned from the Comanche camp. She heard the horses approaching and recognized the danger immediately from the shouting and jeering. "Emily, go to the root cellar now," she instructed, reaching for James's rifle above the fireplace. "Don't come out until I call for you." "But Mama, now Emily." Sarah's voice left no room for argument. As her daughter disappeared through the trapdoor, Sarah positioned herself on the porch, rifle raised. "That's far enough," she called out as the men approached. "This is private property. We've come to teach you a lesson about loyalty, Mrs. Mitchell," slurred the leader, a burly man with a week's growth of beard. "White women don't consort with redskins in these parts." "I'm not consorting with anyone," Sarah replied steadily, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I'm feeding a hungry baby. Now turn around and ride back to town before someone gets hurt." The men laughed, clearly not taking her threat seriously. One of them dismounted, advancing toward the porch with a torch. "Maybe a little fire will clear your thinking, widow." Sarah aimed the rifle at the ground near his feet and fired. The shot kicked up dirt, just inches from his boots, stopping him in his tracks. "The next one won't miss," she warned, quickly reloading. "My husband taught me to shoot, and I'm rather good at it." The standoff might have turned bloody if not for the sudden appearance of Swift Arrow and 2 other Comanche warriors, materializing from the darkness like shadows given form. They positioned themselves silently between Sarah and the intruders, bows drawn and arrows aimed. Behind them came Sheriff Collins and Deputy Wilson at a gallop, drawn by the sound of the gunshot. "That's enough," the sheriff shouted, his own gun drawn. "You men are trespassing and threatening a widow on her own property. Drop those torches now." Outnumbered and suddenly sobering up in the face of actual danger, the ranch hands reluctantly backed down. As the sheriff escorted them away with promises of jail time, Swift Arrow turned to Sarah. "Running Wolf foresaw trouble," he explained simply. "We were watching." Sarah lowered the rifle, her hands shaking with delayed fear. "Thank you. Please tell Running Wolf I'm grateful for his foresight." That night, after Emily was finally asleep, Sarah sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl against the autumn chill. She thought about how completely her life had changed in the span of a few months, from a settler's wife to a widow to a most unlikely bridge between 2 worlds. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time since James's death, she felt equal to the challenge. As November painted the prairie in shades of amber and gold, Skyflower regained enough strength to visit Sarah's cabin. The young Comanche mother arrived on horseback, wrapped in a thick buffalo robe against the chill, with Running Wolf and Swift Arrow as escorts. Morning Star, now thriving and alert at nearly 3 months old, was securely cradled in a beautifully beaded carrier on Skyflower's back. Sarah welcomed them inside, where Emily had helped prepare a simple feast of venison stew, cornbread, and apple preserves. The cabin was warm from the cooking fire, with bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters and patchwork quilts adding color to the humble space. "Your home has good spirit," Skyflower said in halting English, surprising Sarah, who hadn't realized she understood any of the language. "Thank you," Sarah replied, touched by the effort. "Please sit by the fire. You must be tired from riding." As they shared the meal, the awkwardness of their different customs gradually melted away. Emily proudly showed Skyflower her rag doll and the small wooden animals James had carved for her. Skyflower, in turn, presented Emily with a small deerskin pouch decorated with colorful beadwork. "For dreams," she explained with Running Wolf's help. "Put under pillow." Emily's face lit up with delight. "Thank you. It's beautiful." When Morning Star began to fuss, Sarah automatically reached for her, but then hesitated and looked to Skyflower. With a gentle smile, the young mother carefully handed her daughter to Sarah. "She knows you," Skyflower said simply. "You are her milk mother." As Sarah nursed the infant one last time, for Skyflower's milk had finally returned, eliminating the need for Sarah's assistance, she felt a bittersweet pang. This small copper-skinned child had unknowingly helped heal her broken heart, allowing her to use the milk intended for Michael to nurture new life instead. Running Wolf cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Winter comes soon. My people move to the sheltered valley tomorrow for the cold moons." Sarah felt a sudden hollowness at the news. "How far is this valley?" 2 days' ride to the west, he replied. "Too far for daily visits." Sarah nodded, understanding the practicalities even as she felt the impending loss. She had known this arrangement was temporary, but the realization that she would likely never see Morning Star again settled heavily in her chest. Skyflower seemed to sense her emotions. She spoke at length to Running Wolf, who nodded before turning to Sarah. "My daughter wishes to speak her heart to you," he explained. "She says that among our people, children may have many mothers, those who give birth, those who give milk, those who teach wisdom. Morning Star will always know of her milk mother, the white woman with the brave heart who fed her when her own mother could not." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as Skyflower continued speaking. "She says that when Morning Star becomes a woman, she will tell her of the bridge you built between our peoples with nothing more than a mother's love. This story will live in our tribe's memory long after we are gone." Sarah wiped her eyes, deeply moved. "Please tell her that Morning Star brought healing to my home when I thought joy would never return. I will remember her always." As they prepared to leave, Running Wolf presented Sarah with a carefully wrapped bundle. Inside was a magnificent winter coat made of rabbit furs, lined with soft tan buckskin and adorned with subtle beadwork around the collar. "For the cold moons," he explained. "My sister and the women made this for you." "It's too generous," Sarah protested, running her fingers over the exquisite workmanship. Running Wolf shook his head. "You gave life to my grandchild. There is no gift equal to that." He then became solemn, his weathered face grave. "I must speak truth now. More white settlers come each season. The hunting grounds grow smaller. The peace we have kept with your town may not last forever." Sarah nodded, understanding the reality of their situation. The westward expansion showed no signs of slowing, and tensions between settlers and indigenous tribes continued to escalate across the territory. "What will happen?" she asked quietly. Running Wolf's eyes reflected ancient wisdom tinged with sadness. "I cannot see all paths. But know this, whatever comes, Skyflower's family will remember the widow Mitchell and her daughter. No harm will come to you from Comanche hands as long as my family lives." As they mounted their horses to depart, Emily rushed forward impulsively to hug Skyflower, who returned the embrace with evident affection. Sarah stepped forward to say her goodbyes to Morning Star, pressing a gentle kiss to the baby's forehead. "Grow strong and wise, little one," she whispered. "May your path be blessed." Sky Flower spoke once more, her words directed to Emily as Running Wolf translated. "She says that Emily is Morning Star's milk sister now. In our ways, this makes you family forever." Emily beamed at this pronouncement. "Tell her I'll keep Morning Star in my prayers every night." As the Comanche rode away, Sarah and Emily stood hand in hand, watching until they disappeared over the horizon. The winter would be long, but thanks to Running Wolf's promise, they had ample meat smoked and stored, firewood stacked high, and the security of knowing they were under protection. Word of the ranch hands' confrontation and the Comanche warriors' intervention had spread throughout Willow Creek, subtly shifting attitudes. Sheriff Collins had made it clear that he considered Sarah under the law's protection, regardless of her unconventional choices. Even Reverend Porter had spoken from his pulpit about the Good Samaritan, in what many recognized as tacit support for Sarah's actions. That evening, as snow began to fall in gentle flakes outside their window, Sarah tucked Emily into bed. "Mama, do you think we'll ever see Morning Star again?" Emily asked sleepily. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair. "I don't know, sweetheart. The world is changing quickly. But love leaves marks on our hearts that never fade, even when people are far away. Like how we still love Papa and baby Michael even though they're in heaven." "Exactly like that," Sarah confirmed, her voice soft with emotion. After Emily fell asleep, Sarah sat by the fire in her rocking chair, wrapped in her new fur coat. She thought about the unlikely path her life had taken, how tragedy had led to an unexpected connection that crossed boundaries few dared to bridge. Whatever the future held, she had found her strength again, not despite her losses, but because of how she had chosen to respond to them. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the prairie in pristine white. On her mantelpiece sat a small beaded amulet Sky Flower had pressed into her hand at the last moment. A token of remembrance between mothers who had shared the most fundamental bond of nurturing the same child. Sarah touched the amulet gently. There would be more challenges ahead, certainly. The frontier was unforgiving, and the clash of cultures would continue to bring hardship and conflict. But in this moment, in this small cabin warmed by firelight, there was peace. A peace built one drop of milk at a time, one act of compassion in a world too often defined by division. As the fire crackled and snow whispered against the window panes, Sarah Mitchell closed her eyes in gratitude. For the first time since losing James and Michael, she felt completely certain that she and Emily would not merely survive, they would thrive. And somewhere to the west, a Comanche baby girl named Morning Star would grow up knowing that bridges could be built between worlds, even in the most unlikely of circumstances.